Welcome to the Wing Life Podcast, where we talk about wing foiling and the lifestyles of those who enjoy this great sport.
Take two. Thanks for coming back, Chris.
We'll do the GoPro fire up. No problem.
Oh, man. Where are you right now? That's a cool
I'm
little
in
backdrop.
Yeah, I'm in our house in Jamestown, Rhode Island. We have a net zero passive house. We're very lucky to have conceived and built this for at least for our neighborhood, a modest house. But we have 3 children. So my wife, Karen.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So we're in Jamestown, Rhode Island. We have great water sports conditions around here. It's a surfing and sailing kind of capital, and we do it all.
My brother built some passive homes in Vancouver and on Vancouver Island. Quite a lot that goes into those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we were going through the process, there's a lot of overlap with the type of people we run into in our sports and industries that you and I work in. And the people that are working on unique homes like this, unfortunately, they're unique in North America, not as unique in Europe. But it's just people trying to do new things and use efficiencies, be as efficient as possible. And that's what, we talk a lot about, Foiling Week about that, about hydrofoils and the efficiencies that allows and how you can reduce carbon footprints, emissions, all that other stuff. And so it's no surprise that when you and I jam together on some topics, that when we talk to people and you bring up something like a passive house, it's a high performance house,
Mm-hmm.
And so you can have the same geeky conversations in terms of where the efficiencies lie, how to get better at something, how to eliminate waste. It's kind of in line with our value structure.
Yeah, very true. Very true. How did this whole journey into wind and writing start for you?
Yeah, I started to talk about, I'm a classically trained journalist. I just got into it from reading sailing magazines as a kid. I grew up on Long Island and actually not even reading the captions, looking at a lot of pictures. So we had stacks and stacks of old sailing publications and books from my parents. And just, we had sailboats. I grew up cruising on Long Island and got into windsurfing super early in the late 70s, early 80s when I was a little kid. And so always attracted to high performance sports, did an Olympic campaign in 470s. And so loved fast boats, was left to my own devices as a kid on the water and kept going. Sailed in college, sailed big boats, was a professional bowman for a little while, but was always writing and kind of got into magazines right out of college with Sailing World magazine. And actually right before that, Sail magazine up in Boston, I did an internship between my junior and senior year. And so I was always in the water sports through my family, but always interested in performance sports. Did windsurfing as a hobby, did IMCO, the Olympic class, just fooling around, and a little bit of Formula windsurfer. When kiteboarding came up first in Rhode Island with the F1 Ram Air kites, and no quick release, no deep power. You remember those days. And then took a break for a long time from that, had children, started working for the New York Times in 2006 as a correspondent, among other jobs, writing for a lot of other magazines, even classic boat magazines. And then just stopped kiting for a little while. And then wing foiling popped on during the pandemic. And a friend of mine was trying to get ahead of all of us. So I'm paddling back across the bay one day when we were coming back with our cruising boat one spring during the pandemic. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, nothing. So I actually had to beg my friend to get me into it. But as you know, since 2020, 2021, for a lot of us on the East Coast and the New England area and around the world, started to see it and started to do it. So that got tapped into my old, early adopter style of myself, of being the first at a lot of things, even in snowboarding. 1980, I was in 5th grade. I got my first snowboard from a friend. She brought it back from Breckenridge. And so winging just got me right into that. Now I've just been on this freaking crazy path with that. And I was actually with Foiling Week before then. I was interested in hydrofoils and reporting on that and did some lecturing on that, bringing in people. And that's how I met Luca Rosati in 2015. So Foiling Week started in 2014. 13, 14. And then I want to know more about it. So I did a live, before Zoom, I did a live video lecture and zoomed in people from around the world to talk about foiling at a sail loft in Long Island. So we had Peter Johnstone. Yeah, so we had Peter John. It was 2015. So we had Peter Johnstone because they had just been flying the G4, the gunboat, foiling gunboat, and then a month later it crashed, and they never did much with it after that. We also had Patrick Rinn, who started Waterlust, and he was into kite foiling back then. Waterlust is that kind of like online kind of information oceanography, sustainability kind of website that he started. He's an oceanographer. And then who else did we have? We had Anthony Katoon, who was a moth sailor. We didn't have any women, I don't think, which was a shame. But we had a lot of kind of, again, early adopters to the hydrofoil space. A couple of America's Cup designers. It was right after the America's Cup in San Francisco. So, yeah.
That's pretty awesome, actually. That's a lot of history.
Yeah, so I gave you a big dump, but I'm used to talking about these things because everything that we're talking about in foiling is recent history. So it's important to me. Like I was at the AWSI trade show in Hood River this fall. You were at, and so my mind, when I look at the evolutions of the sport and different corners of the sport and look at the athletes, I'm trying to make sure I keep a thread between the products, the people, the and the benchmarks in the recent foiling history, because I'm reporting on it all the time, and Foiling Week is trying to make those connections with people as well.
So for people, because I'm from East Coast, like we sail a lot on Lake Ontario, and I got a bunch of buddies that sail on Lake Erie and then Quebec and Magdalen Islands and all the way through the kind of East Coast.
Cool. Yeah, beautiful up there.
So what is Foiling Week?
Okay, Foiling Week, for everyone, it is we now call it a festival. But Foiling Week was started in 2014. If you guys remember way back in the 2012-13 America's Cup in San Francisco, it was in catamarans that were kind of never meant to fly, to foil. There in the design rule, it was very discouraged to consider hydrofoiling. But Team New Zealand figured out how to make it fly. And that turned into a foiling America's Cup, and it never looked back since. They're now in monohulls in the America's Cup. But when that happened, there was already one class that was hydrofoiling, an open class called the Moth class, which you may be familiar with, or your listeners may be familiar with. And it's really cool. It's just a single-handed boat with an open design rule that's been since way back in the 40s and maybe even before that. But they had a design rule that allowed people to experiment, and they wound up getting to hydrofoiling, and it dominated the class. And so that was really the only proper, and there wasn't really a one design, but that was a really, really proper foiling class. And the America's Cup came along, and with something like that, where millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars gets put into figuring this equation out in water sports, and all that information and excitement had to go somewhere. So what Luca Rosati did, he's from Italy. He was a moth sailor. He sailed 18-foot skiffs in Sydney. So like a lot of us, he was interested in high-performance boats. And he said, he goes, I know a couple of these designers through the Moth class. Everyone was kind of going to that class because they were trying to learn even just how to think about racing around a course at 28 knots upwind and 30 knots downwind. And so he's like, let me put together an event on Lake Garda just for hydrofoiling, so people can come together and share their notes on products they're working on, designs they're working on, ideas they're working on, studying ventilation, whatever it is. So Foiling Week started as a way to capture the energy that was created by the Moth class, but primarily the 2013 America's Cup, and give people a place to hang out. And so it was a lot of presentations, white papers, trials, testing boats on Lake Garda at the Malchesine at the Fralia Vela, which is, they still host it now in the 11th year this year. And it started really geeky, just America's Cup designers and a couple top sailors. And it just slowly kind of grew. The trials, people brought more and more boats. Pretty much any hydrofoiling boat that you see today, motor or otherwise, came through Foiling Week since 2014 as like a presentation or a test trial or something like that people came to check out. And now a lot of those foiling classes have their own events, have racing as part of the racing component of Foiling Week there. We still have exhibitors from all different manufacturers and designers and brands. And still a lot of talking points are our podcast is an evolution of the Gurit form. Gurit was like one of the largest manufacturers of carbon, and they supported our form for about 10 years. And so now it's a festival now. So it's a place where classes come to run big events that don't have a lot of, it's not like a world championship, but people come there to hang out with everyone else. The Moth class this year, in the last couple of years, has their biggest event in the world there. So even though the world championships may have 80 boats, we may have like 110 boats, at Foiling Week. So it's really cool. There are parties. Now we have a foiling film festival. We have a design challenge, it's called the Sue Moth Challenge. So the Sustainable Moth Challenge. And that is sponsored by 11th Hour and a bunch of other organizations. And that is a now legacy 7-year-old design challenge with more than 10 universities from around the world, including ETS in Montreal, one of the older ones involved in the design challenge, where they have to design and build a moth, a sailing moth boat, a single-handed moth boat that fits within the rules, the racing rules for that class association, but they have very specific design parameters for sustainability, both in materials, all the way through the design and build process. They do life cycle assessment of all the parts that they make. And out of that, not only do they have to push the limits of materials, I mean, they're coming up with reconstitutable bioresins, where not only are they trying to use flax and bioresins to make a boat that's still light enough and stiff enough to fly and support a human, but they're thinking about ways that at the end of the life cycle of that product, can they melt it down and reuse the resin or reuse some of the fibers? And now big industry like Persico Marine that builds a lot of the America's Cup boats and the AC40s, and a whole bunch of other designers and builders from around the world and manufacturers look to these university students and say, you guys are really pushing the limits of that. Starboard, who's a manufacturer of one of the largest manufacturers of water sports products, they jam with these university students to share with them what they've learned by trying to do the same things and the things they've failed at. And then these students kind of push these things further forward, and industries want to see what they're up to for sustainability. So that's, I just went deep into that wormhole with the Sue Moth Challenge.
No, I appreciate it.
That's an example of some of the things that Foiling Week has been involved with. And, all the way up through Artemis Technologies, which was an America's Cup Swedish team. And now they're just coming online with hydrofoiling small amounts people ferries for Europe. So they have a couple, they're starting that production. They also have luxury boats. So all that stuff has kind of been presented at Foiling Week over the years, and it just keeps moving forward and we keep evolving. And now we have not our first. We've had a couple Foiling Weeks in the United States, early days in Newport and Miami, and then also in Sydney twice. But those were kind of early days, like 5 years ago, the foiling landscape looked totally different. Not as many boats, not as many events, not as many athletes or designers or manufacturers. But now we're taking another whack at having an International Foiling Week. And that's what brought you to us, talking about Foiling Week 2025 in Pensacola at the end of February and into March. And we're in the middle of that planning process right now.
Okay, so it's growing.
What a dump, huh?
That was good. That was good. Bring it. I like listening. And all right, so Pensacola, for those who don't know it, where is it?
So Pensacola is in the great state of Florida on the south coast to southeast of the United States. So if you think of Florida as kind of like this big kind of arm sticking out into the to the ocean, and it makes the Gulf of Mexico. As you come up in the Gulf of Mexico along the west coast of Florida, and you turn up and you start to head west towards Alabama and New Orleans, so Louisiana, that is the Panhandle. So the upper Gulf Coast of Florida is called the Panhandle. And all the way out near the end, as you head west, right near the Alabama border, is Pensacola, the city of Pensacola, which is a really cool place, really well known for actually a lot of the lumber kind of coming in and out of the United States was for the middle of the country, was kind of shipped in and out through there. But what we know Pensacola for in our foiling universe is that's the home base for American Magic, which is a 2-time America's Cup challenger from New York Yacht Club, which is based in New York and Newport. But they chose Pensacola because not only is Pensacola Bay, and you have the ocean there too, is a perfect, flat, relatively deep water place for foiling and with a lot of varied conditions. But also the city is kind of one of those kind of southern and middle of the country cities that really did a great job renewing itself after, like a post-industrial kind of city. They've put an awful lot of effort into making a beautiful city with inviting kind of smarter businesses, smarter industries, technology firms, younger business people, and a really beautiful place to live. And there's a lot of Florida cities like that, including places like St. Petersburg, also on the West Coast. But up there, Pensacola is like a shining example of a beautiful city with a relatively new baseball team and baseball field. The Blue Angels, so our really famous Navy pilots that do, not only are they fighter pilots, but they do all the great acrobatics.
I just saw a documentary on that not that long ago.
Yeah, so their kind of summer base is there. Their winter base is San Diego. So it's a beautiful city. And actually the coolest thing for all of us, besides the fact that it's warmer, it's a little cooler up in the Panhandle than it is down in Miami, of course, in the wintertime. February is kind of like their spring. So we're psyched for that. But the greatest thing about it, besides the fact that the city's beautiful, it has incredible waterfront, it has year-round people living there, a lot of people come visit it, is that you have this big, beautiful bay that American Magic loves to use for their AC-75 and their AC-40. But you have a big, like a Cape Hatteras kind of thing on the East Coast.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
You have a barrier beach with beautiful hotels and a lot of it's like literally white sand beaches and beautiful green Gulf water and, clear Gulf water. And so whatever wind direction you have, you can get waves or flat water, and it's all right there. You have the city of Pensacola and then the city of Pensacola Beach. And both of those cities, through their tourism dollars and a lot of other support, wanted to bring a foiling festival to Pensacola, thanks to all the psych that they got out of the America's Cup team. And it's just a cool place. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Florida, but never out that far. And the city's beautiful. It's really well done. There's a lot of great energy there. The people are really nice. And we're psyched to be there.
Okay. So let's say somebody wants to drive down from Toronto, what could they expect?
Yeah, well, this is a big one. Remember when we spoke before and we were trying to tell you how this all works. So
we have 2 hours. Don't worry about it.
Oh, good. Let's go for it. Yeah, we'll go for it. And so, I explained just a little bit about Foiling Week in Lake Garda. So that is the home of Foiling Week. It's just beautiful. Lake Garda has an also special geographic situation where it's one of those deep cavernous lakes with big kind of granite cliffs on either side, runs north and south. And in the mornings, they get a huge, I don't know if it's technically a katabatic wind, but they get a northerly wind early in the morning and it's blowing like 25. And then by like 10 o'clock, that starts to die. There's no breeze in the middle of the day. Everyone has their pasta and beer. And then a sea breeze comes in from the other direction. So they have a really incredible situation like that. And the way that event has evolved is it's evolved a lot around racing, even though Foiling Week is no longer just racing. Trials, we have a lot of, I didn't even mention our charitable situations that we like to support. And but it's a lot of boats. And last year we had our first ever downwind SUP foil event. And we also have had e-foils in the last 2 years. And then we were doing dock start, pump foil, and SUP flat water clinics as well. And
is that Garda or Pensacola?
That was at Garda. And,
okay.
we've done wing foil racing there as well, but not to a large number. And so it's been early on with the board sports side of things in Lake Garda. Let's go to the United States. A couple years after we've tried to do we've done a Foiling Week here. And all of a sudden, the moth class is very tiny. Wasps, which is like a one design version of the Moth class, are bigger, but not nearly as big as the 80 boats that we'll have at Foiling Week. And but board sports in the United States have grown super fast. Mm-hmm. And the wing foil racing U.S. Nationals in San Francisco this last summer near St. Francis Yacht Club was really big, and it was a huge success. And there's a lot of people wanting to race, do wing foil racing. Even our Olympic development coach, Leandro Spina, all of his kids who are in the other classes want to do wing foil racing. So a lot of those kids will be in Pensacola. So the thing with Foiling Week, if you want to come down to Foiling Week in Pensacola, a very big part of it, even though that we'll have boats, we'll have A-class catamarans. We're going to have, I forget which version of the NACRA, but we'll have the NACRA catamarans. And then we will have wing foil, we'll have Moth and Wasp. But we are going to have a couple hundred riders and hopefully more in a lot of the board sports disciplines. So one of the marquee events is the Foil Surf Race League, which is only a couple years old. They're based out of Cocoa Beach. Their main event each year is almost like this little surf foiling championship in the United States. It's professional. There's prize money. They're in Cocoa Beach the weekend after Foiling Week, so in the first full weekend of March. And so we invited them, say, hey, can we come to a Foil Surf Race League event too? So all these people coming from around the world, they have at least 80 to 100 riders coming from all over the world because it's growing in popularity. And we're like, let's give you something to do the week before. And we'd love these athletes to mix with all of our other athletes and then also the industry and the university students and our charities and come join our discussions, that we're talking about all these issues that grow up around foiling. And we want you there. So they agreed to do that. That was Brian and Billy Bosch out of Cocoa Beach. And so that's bracketed on the last weekend of the event. The first couple of days of the event, the 24th, 25th, 26th, somewhere around there, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, is all the racing on Pensacola Bay. And that's in wing foil racing, kite foil racing, catamaran foiling racing, which is A-class and NACRA, birdie fish, which is kind of like a recreational foiling monohull, but with almost like a Mocha dolly foils coming out the side. I'm probably forgetting a couple.
Yeah, you can pull it up if you want.
Yeah. But anyway, so those are the kind of strict racing on those first 3 days. Then in the middle 2 days, and this is just on the water stuff, I'll talk about what's happening off the water. The middle of the week, the Thursday, Friday, is multidisciplinary. And what's happening there is there are two venues that are awesome. So we have racing in the beginning and then surf foil racing at the end with a lot of social and other types of commercial events in the afternoons on every day. Two venues. There's an ocean venue for the surf foil events and board sports events. And then there's a bay venue that's just inside that peninsula on the bay and then on the city front for Pensacola Yacht Club to launch all the boats out of. And in the middle of this event, we're going to have a multidisciplinary event. So on the city front, we'll have wake foiling. We have sponsors for wake foiling. We have professional athletes coming for that. We have judges. It's going to be really fantastic. And there's going to be a wake foil course right in front of the city front, in front of our event village, which is right in the middle of the city. And then we also have a little marina that's right there. And we're developing a pump foil and dock start facility. And we're going to be doing pump foil demonstration and competition as well. So I'm sharing with you the different venues. There's going to be e-foiling, foiling experiences going on as well. But on those middle 2 days, this is for the water activities, everyone who is at Foiling Week, we are going to do whatever, and this is particularly in the board sports, but there's probably multidisciplinary athletes in the boats as well. But predominantly people in the board sports, whatever the conditions are that day, we're all going to do. So if it's just ripping out, if it's ripping in the bay, offshore on the ocean, but ripping in the bay, or if it's ripping side shore or side on the ocean, we're going to do a downwind, and that's with wing, with foil assist like foil drive and stoke, para wing, SUP, and surf foil, and then e-foil as well. So that's going to be just a massive downwinder. We're going to have a race We're also going to have bus and jet ski assist. So everyone will just, once we do a race, and then we'll do laps where people just go down, they'll get shuttled back up the beach or across with a ferry if we're on the inside. And we're just going to be doing laps of a downwind. If there's just beautiful surf, then we'll do some surf foil race and then surf style in all the disciplines. And it'll be fun. We're gonna have professional judges there, so we can judge these things. But we really want everyone, the community, just to enjoy themselves together. If there's no wind at all on those 2 days, or one of those 2 days, or half of those 2 days, then we all there's either bus shuttles from the ocean side to the city front, or a ferry. We get everyone to there, and we are pump foiling, and we are dock starting, and we are wake foiling, and we are e-foiling. And we have competitions set up for that, judges set up for that, but also just for fun. So I think if you're any kind of foiler or foil curious even, because there's trials this whole period of time for 6 days, you're getting to test out whatever you want to test out. And there's probably some prototype craft there as well.
So demos?
Yep, absolutely.
Demos?
There'll be demos in pretty much all the classes that you see. And also in terms of any prototypes that might be there, because we always have a couple. And then also in terms of all the board sports. So a lot of the brands will be there. We're talking to F1, Cabrina, Slingshot, Armstrong's supporting the wake foil side of things. North Sports is supporting the pump foil and dock start side of things. So, but this isn't, it's mainly about getting all these brands together so people can test out this stuff and bring their top athletes there too, so we can meet them all, because this is open to the public. So to answer your question, why would you come down here? Well, first of all, it's better than the North in the wintertime. But I
have another question.
Yeah, shoot.
Before we end that train of thought, are the brands having kind of like AWSI presentation booths? Are there like food trucks, food venues, that kind of thing? Or what kind of a feel is it?
So the base setup at Foiling Week there's an ocean venue, which is supported by the Hilton Hotel for all the oceanside events. And there's a little bay inside part of that too, that there'll be some IQ foil racing and that kind of stuff. Forgot to mention the IQ foil, the Olympic foiling windsurfer. But primarily we are all the after water sports activities happen right on the city front at an event village in a park right in the middle of the city. And that's where the pump and dock starting facility is. There will be food trucks. There are other vendors there. To answer your question about like the AWSI part of it, there won't be any presentations from brands. It's not a trade show, but perfect. There will be exhibitions. They're like exhibition tents and that kind of stuff, demos, trials, that kind of thing. If those brands decide to take advantage of that. And so it's, when we talk about it, it's a proper festival. And so I'm sharing with you the waterfront stuff. So even though there's racing at the beginning, racing at the end, and then this awesome little multidisciplinary approach in the middle for everyone to stop what you're doing in your racing components and come play with us for 2 days on the water, and let's do whatever's the most fun. In addition to that, we want everything around 4 or 5 o'clock has to end. Everyone wraps their things up on the ocean. Everyone who's doing on the waterfront stuff, wake foil, dock start, all the boats that are racing in the bay, they wrap it all up. They all go back to Pensacola Yacht Club, and everyone comes back to the event village where there's a lounge. We're going to have music jam sessions. Every other night, we're going to have a panel discussion on some really great topics with some really awesome industry people, not just board sports, not just boats, material science, issues that affect us, rules. How do you govern, certain disciplines, and just try to keep costs down for certain things as well. And we want to know a lot from these athletes. We want these top athletes here. I mentioned before the Foiling Film Festival. We're going to have a Foiling Film Festival with a lot of premieres there, and we're going to be judging those as well. But that's where everyone who's part of the event comes to this beautiful old theater in the middle of Pensacola, 400-seat theater. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And so I kind of rambling a little bit, but sharing with you that AWSI was really exciting, but it is a trade show. And this is kind of like, it's kind of a different kind of show.
Public focused versus connecting brands with like retailers.
Exactly. Brands, retailers, those kind of individuals are still all frothers like you and me, whether it be in other wind sports, boats, manufacturing, whatever it is. We have Tesla. We've had Tesla as a sponsor. Everyone wants to learn from each other. So it's more like something where people come to, they're just so psyched to learn about other corners of hydrofoiling. And obviously we like to make a lot of connections to industry and design and research, and then also use our platform to put forward whatever charities that we're working on as well.
So can we talk a little bit about those charities?
We don't have them fully sorted yet, but one thing I will say, because there are kind of umbrella charitable organizations there that one of them, the Satori Foundation, I don't know where we stand with them, but they're focused heavily on sustainability. So I know we'll have some kind of relationship with them. Our event has to meet certain sustainability standards. Foiling Week is a World Sailing special event. So it's not like other kinds of championships. It's the Volvo Ocean Race is a special event. The Global Wing Sports and Kite Sports Associations are special events. The Vendée Globe, which started last weekend, a single-handed nonstop around the world race, that's a special event. And the Olympics are a special event, and Foiling Week is a special event. So, and all of those events try to meet certain sustainability standards in terms of how they run their event, how they move people around the world to do it. All the way down to the way we do our food prep and get rid of our garbage on site. So that's a big part of it too. But as far as the charities are concerned, there's going to be a heavy sustainability component of it. Another thing that's really important for Foiling Week is accessibility. So we are trying to work on, there's a Wounded Warriors component to it where you work with disabled veterans that we're going to probably put together. And then there are some surf therapy organizations that we'd really love to work with, both nationally and locally. So there's Christian surfers, and there's Autism Surfs. And then there's an organization based out of where I am in Rhode Island called Gnome Surf, which works with severely disabled people. And so we're really working on trying to find some partnerships to make those kind of charities happen, because anything having to do with the sea, we do lots of beach cleanups. We do tons of that kind of stuff. And being a sustainable event is really important to us. It's like this virtually impossible task, but we're trying to do it. But when we think about other charities, thinking about something to help people who can either use some inspiration, or they can inspire us too, but give them that either foiling experience or water sports experience. And we can all kind of win from that, but really positively affect our community by doing that. That's a big part of what we're trying to do with Foiling Week in Pensacola as well. So, and that's forever. That's for everyone. I mean, we're talking to all the brands in the board sports side of things, because they're the most visible. They're way more visible than sailors, right? Because they're just self-promoting themselves. They're young. They get it in the digital age and in social media. And so I'm talking to brands primarily, bring your athletes here, because I know they all want to be here and play. They have things to compete in, and then they have things to froth on, like you saw in AWSI. Everyone's towing around, foil driving, doing paddling up, whatever. They're just so stoked to be together. And that's what the middle of our week is about. But we get those athletes there. We want to know their opinion on the industry. We want to know their opinion on safety. And we want them to join us in bring their kind of reach, not just to Foiling Week, but to the ideas that we're trying to present, and then also to the charities we're trying to support. So it's really important that the athletes and those brands really buy in and come, and then people come, just to enjoy it. So whatever level hydrofoiler you're at, whether you're in boats in one of these classes that we're talking about, or you're just a wing foiler, which there's a lot of wing foilers in North America right now, then there's a place for you at Foiling Week, not just to try out new stuff, but also to be a part of these big discussions that we're having in the beginning of a lot of these disciplines. And again, Pensacola is a perfect opportunity for us to tap into this interest in all the different forms of board sports, because that's where it's growing fastest in the United States, particularly pump foiling and wake foiling in the US. It's this sleeper thing that's growing pretty quickly. And the wake foil industry is there's only a couple pro athletes in the national kind of wakeboarding tour. Armstrong has a couple women and men in it that they'll be there. But that's I'm really excited to see the interest in North America to come down and be a part of that, because we're going to be running dock starting, pump foiling, e-foiling, foil assist, and wake foiling every day of the week. Those are the only disciplines that you can run all day long.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not
So.
not wind dependent. Well,
No.
that actually, thanks for the clarification and just thanks for introducing this to us. It really kind of, I understand what it is now, and it sounds like a great time. Great time. So if you can even bring the family down. What's the accommodations in that area, and are people flying in, driving in, bringing their own gear?
Yeah. So really, really awesome point. I think the registrations are just starting to open up for a couple of the classes. The board sports registrations will be opening up next week, but also at the same time on all the Foiling Week channels and on the Foiling Week Pensacola website, which I think will get you all that, the exact details of that, so you can put it together. They have they have a schedule, both social and on the water. And then they also have the kind of, what would you call it? The logistics in terms of transportation, where to fly into, where to stay. We have a series of hotels and other accommodations that are heavily discounted for our event, which we're so psyched about. They've done a really great job helping us out with that. So it's impossible to get, like 300 foilers and participants free housing. But there's really heavily discounted rates in the city of Pensacola at, right next to the venue, and also at the Hilton, which is where most of the board sports are going to be hosted on the ocean side, which is only just like a couple miles from the city, but we'll have buses going back and forth all the time. So any events that are going on, like the Foiling Film Festival happens, everyone's wrapping up their SUP foiling and surf foiling and IQ foiling on the beach, and they're winging and they're packing it up. And, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, there's a bus taking as many people as it can handle to the city, to the event village. Everyone's getting together and they're walking down the street to the Foiling Film Festival.
Do I need a wetsuit?
Yeah, you'll need a wetsuit. Yeah, let's talk some specifics there.
Yeah.
In the end of February, like I said, it's kind of like the beginning of the spring in the Gulf Coast there, but it is beautiful. You can get any kind of weather. So, but that's good for us because we want to do a lot of these different disciplines. And especially when you're talking about, the boats are cool. So when you're in the bay, if it's windy and you want flat water, you just move to one side of the bay or the other, right? It could be blowing 30 and you just move to one side and it's flat and windy. You move to the other side, you can get bumps, whatever you want. That's why American Magic likes just a big, oval bay, relatively shallow bay, but deep enough for all sorts of hydrofoils. And so, but we also want waves, so there can be winter storms going back through the Gulf that'll send up waves, and we'll have a perfectly sunny 70-degree day and have just glassy surf, or you can just get ripping breeze in a front coming one way or the other, and you can have these beautiful downwinds on the ocean, which we're prepared for. And so as far as to answer your question about the wetsuit, my guess would be I was there in April, so February, March, April, so 2 months later. I think the water's probably going to be around 60 degrees, maybe a little bit warmer than that, hopefully.
It's like a 4.3.
Yeah, 4.3 if it's cranking, windy, and overcast. Otherwise, it's like a 3.2.
3.2.
Yeah, and then if you're like, if it's a glass off or you're just doing pump foiling, you're just barely in a shorty, So that's kind of where it stands. Yeah, you can get any kind of weather there. It could be, you can wake up one morning, it could be 45 degrees, or whatever that is in Celsius. But my guess is you'll get kind of a range of conditions, but generally it's going to be pretty mild. I think your average would be around 60, 65 degrees. And then we're going to definitely have some breeze, and there might be some no breeze, but there's a chance you can have like epic conditions in all the disciplines in 1 week.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So, awesome.
Yeah. And we're prepared for that. In Garda, you have the wind that is very predictable. And in Hood River, even though we went there.
We got skunked this year.
We got skunked, but I flew in on Monday. My buddy's like, I'll bring the stuff down to the hatchery.
You came early.
Let's just go. And Monday and Tuesday were really great, but that can happen anywhere. But the thing that you and I saw when we were there, when I was at all these in Sardinia at these kite foil and wing foil events, when there was no wind, all these young athletes are pump foiling around or dropping a wing in the water and trying to like pump up onto the foil with just the wing. And all these athletes, all these people want to just play. and we're going to have e-foils. We're going to have the Candela motorboat, luxury little small motorboat foiling boats. We'll have all sorts of other kind of motorized foiling craft. And so there's plenty to do. So when we look at a changeable time of year in a place like that, when you have a bay and you have marinas and you have a city front and you have an ocean front, we have everything to play with. And so whatever your ability is, if you're into boat foiling or board sports foiling, there's going to be so much to do. Do you bring your own gear? Absolutely. If you even think about racing wing foil, come bring your gear and give it a shot. That's the place to learn and have a good time, because we're going to be just doing it in flat protected water for wing foil racing. Same thing for kite foil racing. Same thing for IQ and wind foil racing. We've got a place for you. The biggest thing is whatever discipline that you like to come down to do, or you just want to come down and hang out and go do the trials and sit in and watch and be a part of the conversations that we're having about industry and the development of new sports. Come and do that. Come do the trials. Come to the Foiling Film Festival. You got a cheap hotel room. You come to a beautiful little city, and you're watching kind of the history of foiling kind of open up. When we have that downwind race, whenever we have it during the week, it's going to be one of the largest downwind races in the United States, that's happened. And just like when we had our race in Garda, it was just kind of a race, I'm doing air quotes right now if you're just listening to this podcast. And but it's just a really great thing to gather people together and be a part of it all. And it's not just about racing. It's about the foiling community, and it's about how far-reaching that foiling community is. So you're going to be seeing America's Cup designers. You're going to be seeing women and men, like the women mechatronics people from the America's Cup that we talk to all the time. They're going to be there talking about those kind of technologies. They're going to want to be talking about foil design from small foiling manufacturers, in North America and also in Europe and around the world. So it's a really, really cool mix.
Website?
The website is, foilingweek.com, and on our Facebook page, on Instagram. And actually the umbrella organization for this is We Are Foiling. So that's a good way to kind of dive into what we're doing, all the different parts. We have the Foiling Awards. We have the Sumoth Challenge. Sorry about that. We have the Foiling Awards. We have the Sumoth Challenge. We have the Foiling Film Festival. We have Foiling Week. Now we have Foiling Week Pensacola. And so We Are Foiling is a great way to get straight into it. For Foiling Week Pensacola, let me look that up really quick, because that is a very specific website. So just give me a second, and we can work together on this. Foiling Week Pensacola 2025. Boom, boom. Let's do Sailing Pensacola. Pensacola 2025.
Okay. I also have foilingweek.com.
Yeah, just go to foilingweek.com. Right up front is the registration, the beginning of the registration for Foiling Week Pensacola 2025. So
yeah, there we go. All right, foilingweek.com, everybody.
Yep, 103 days, 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So should we wrap this up by talking about your new podcast?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me get you back on the screen. Okay, there we go. Cool. Well, I love your podcast, and I got to tell you, you're doing a great service for not just the foiling industry, but for the water sports industry. I know you're not getting rich doing this with your team, but it's really, really fantastic, because it's kind of the only place where, you have Eric Antonsen, right? From the Progression podcast. All hail, he's the OG for us foilers, especially, particularly board sports foilers for the podcasting. And then there's a lot that's grown out of that. And you guys are the kind of the everything, from psychology to techie gear to just like foiling changed my life, and now I'm addicted. And when I don't foil, I'm grumpy. So I need to buy new equipment to make me feel better.
That's pretty much sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Did I get it? I got it.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Well, you're helping us live our best lives and stay in touch with that community. So thank you for that. The We Are Foiling podcast, which is on Apple and Spotify and every place you get your podcasts, is new this year. We just finished our first season, and the goal with that was, I think I'd mentioned with Foiling Week in Lake Garda, it started with presentations, people presenting their design ideas or their concepts or their research. And then we, as I kind of came on board, we wanted to learn more what people thought about the changes in industry and technology and all this other stuff, and different topics focused around safety, accessibility, sustainability, all those issues. And so we started to make panel discussions. The Magenta Project, which is an organization meant to give greater opportunity to women in the marine industry and make those connections. We support them, and they were an early part of our Foiling Week GURT forum. And that forum, through the pandemic, we did it online. So we were able to actually bring in more people. We used that technology to bring more people in the conversations that we were having. And it was a huge success. The problem is then when we went back to Lake Garda, we still wanted to do that format. So we would have people live in Lake Garda, and then we'd have people zoomed in, and then we would record that live and then save it. And if you go on our YouTube channel for Foiling Week, you can see all of those old forum discussions, which were great. And we're working on repackaging them to fill out in between our podcast now. So people can re-listen to those, because they're still very prescient. They're still very useful. And so we got our forum got too big for Foiling Week to run it at the venue. We had a lot of interest, a lot of topics that people wanted to talk about. The sports, the technology was growing so much, and we just couldn't handle the size of it at Foiling Week. It was distracting. It was good, but it was taking away a lot of resources on site. So we said, okay, let's make a podcast out of it. And so this year was the first year that we stopped panel discussions at Lake Garda, and we started it's been about a year in the making, but we started our podcast, and it's called the We Are Foiling podcast, because that is now the umbrella name for all the components that started with Foiling Week. Now it's the Foiling Organization, which is an industry organization. I mentioned the Foiling Film Festival, the Sustainable Moth Challenge, and there's a couple of the Foiling Awards. There's a couple other elements, Foiling Film Festival. So we have the We Are Foiling podcast. We had our first season, and our goal is a little bit different than your goal. We're not going to talk about products per se. We're going to talk about topics that are relevant in the moment, and what people are kind of talking about that year. And so, for example, this was an America's Cup year, second time in the AC 75, a big deal, and in our sport. And so our very first guest was Grant Dalton, who is the head of Team New Zealand. So Emirates Team New Zealand, and the holders of the America's Cup. And now, since we've recorded all those things, is still the holder of the America's Cup this fall. So we started with Grant. Our second guest was Olivia Piana, who, if you remember last year, set the record for most time on foil and distance traveled on foil on the coast of Portugal to bring attention to land use issues there. We had her at Foiling Week this year to do a premiere of her film as part of the Foiling Film Festival. She was one of our guests. Who else? We had Torben Tornquist from Artemis Technologies, because they were just starting to launch all of their foiling ferries this year. So we wanted to talk about that. We had another America's Cup component with Helena Scutt, who's a mechatronics person for American Magic, and on the first ever women's America's Cup team, at least on the U.S. side of things.
Well done.
And then, Ben Biddick from Harkin, which is one of our partners, to talk about the hydraulics. So we had a mechatronics person and a hydraulics person talking on how that all works. We had Cash Berzola, who's the man of the moment in wing foiling, because he just lit the world on fire in Cabo Verde this spring. We talked to him right after that. Who am I forgetting? We had Nick Leeson, the elusive Nick Leeson from Lift Foils, the only U.S. foil manufacturer besides Delta Foils, which is here in Rhode Island. So we wanted to know what was going on with Nick, one of the pioneers with e-foiling, but also hydrofoils. So that's kind of the mix that we were going for this year. And as we move and we talk to them about just big picture topics too, what's going on with them. We want to learn about them, and then we want to learn about their opinions. And that's what the panel discussions at Foiling Week are all about. And we're going to kind of rekindle those panel discussions now that we're in the US with a kind of a slightly different audience than the European audience. slightly different group of riders than the European group, although we'll have Europeans and Australians and South Americans. So the podcast has been cool. It's like right up my alley as a journalist. It still takes remarkably at least as long to put together a podcast, as you know, as it does to write a feature article or a news article or something like that, or more. Yeah, or more.
Like it's awesome what you guys are doing, and I'm looking forward to this event because it's awesome that stuff is growing in North America. I know Europe is where a lot of brands primarily focus their attention, but there are a lot of people that are in Canada, Mexico, United States, and all the surrounding kind of Caribbean sort of everything, that it's amazing that we can get an event of this size and of this quality in our backyard.
Yeah. And I think what I love listening to your podcast and like Eric Antinson's podcast, The Progression Project, you guys recognize where we're at in the history of all this stuff. We're super new and things are changing very rapidly. So it's so cool to watch, not just to feel it under our feet or in our hands when we pull sheets and we're steering. But I think that it's important to have these conversations to think about how we want it to go. And that's, what's his name? James Casey, who's kind of a downwind OG with Dave Kalama and Code Foils. He talks about that all the time. He goes, hey, if we don't like how the Maui to Molokai is being run, then we can say, let's do it this way because we don't want the sport to go too much in one direction or the other, for example. If you and I don't like the balance of the way the type of guests that are on different influencers channels, you and I can say, hey, I'm going to have more female guests or more guests from South America or South Africa or, from a different part of the world. We have kind of some control over the way our industry and our sports are evolving. And when I mentioned that comment about distribution, that's just a small part of saying we have voices that are disproportionately large for our communities. And we have a responsibility to have as much fun with them as possible, but also make sure that we're spreading some good sustainability messages, accessibility messages, diversity messages, all those kind of things. So I know I just kind of pivoted to that.
No. That's awesome. Hey, Chris, I want to say thanks for taking the time and for recording such last minute. But
they didn't need to know. They didn't need to know that.
We were just talking.
Well, we were just talking. You and I and Nicola Maggio, our media guru at Foiling Week. Yes. I know the three of us were talking this week, and I think this is perfect timing. And we're excited to have you come down to Foiling Week again. There's going to be a lot of influential writers and industry people producing their own content. I think that's the one great thing we have in the hydrofoiling space, especially a lot of the young writers across all the different disciplines, even in the regular boats. So those guys are going to be producing a ton of content. They're going to be having so much fun. I want everyone to have a really good time together. And it's up to people like you and me to make sure that we capture it and have those conversations and share it with the rest of the world. Because it's going to be a lot of fun. All
right, man. Thanks for joining.
Cool. And, thank you, brother.
We'll chat soon. And hockey, right? You brought your daughter to hockey tonight?
Yep. I had Canada on my mind. It's about 38 degrees outside right now. It's the coldest day of the year so far. So, but makes me think about Pensacola, like the last time I was there. So Foiling Week, Pensacola in February. We'll keep reminding you about that. Keep watching listening to your podcast, listening to We Are Foiling, and let's get the froth high. Any ideas you have too about this event? If you guys go to foilingweek.com and look at that website, your podcast, anyone out there, send us a note. Say, hey, you're missing this component. You're missing this discipline. We want more of X, Y, and Z. We're like, cool. This is early days. Let's go make this event great.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Great,
thanks,
Luke.
everybody.
Have a great night. Viva Canada.